Hey, welcome back once again to Kimmell and Cox, your source for all things entertainment. I'm Keith Cox. I'm joined, as I am every week, by my good friend Dylan Kimmell. And if this is your first time with us, we're glad you're here. But if you've missed any of our previous episodes, be sure to go back and check those out. Today, we are going to be talking about a TV series. It is a Hulu original series, streaming now. There are 2 seasons out. It's called Only Murders in the Building. Great show, really funny, and it's a nice twist on the whodunit type of murder mystery thing. Yeah. It's a very comical take on that. It premiered on August 31st, 2021. Created by Steve Martin and John Hoffman, and starring Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez. A very interesting combination. You have 2 veteran comedians working with someone who is not a comedian. She's an actress and singer. But it actually works out pretty well. It's a very entertaining show. The plot follows 3 neighbors who are all strangers to each other, but they all live in the same upscale apartment building called the Arconia. And so they kind of come together because they're all obsessed with this true crime podcast that's called All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma.
I will say that this is the show that got me to message you back saying, hey, do you still want to do that podcast?
Oh, right. Yeah. I forgot about that. It's kind of appropriate that we're talking about this show because it's all centered around a podcast. And here we are.
Yeah, it was this show because when I was watching it, I was like, you know what? That actually looks like... I mean, we've been talking about the us doing this podcast for
probably
a long while,
2 or 3 years maybe,
and we've never really went ahead and done it. And once I saw the show, I was like, we've got to do it. And I messaged you back. I messaged you, and then you messaged me back. You know what's funny? I was just thinking the same thing. And I was like, well, then we must do it then.
We have to. There's like no putting it off at that point. So we were both on the same page with that for sure. So these 3 unique individuals, they all again, they have this shared interest in this true crime podcast. And after a fellow resident is found dead in his apartment, they all decide to band together to investigate his murder, and this eventually leads to them forming their own podcast, which is called Only Murders in the Building. That's where the title of the series comes from. And it's funny how how everything comes together. But we find throughout the first season, there's lots of twists and turns in this series, and when you find out the connections between the different characters, the recurring characters, and things like that. So you have Steve Martin is playing Charles Hayden Savage, who is a semi-retired actor who used to be the star of a popular 1990s detective series called Brazos.
Brazos, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting thing, I was looking up the trivia on that. Brazos is actually a name of, I think it's a river or a creek. Near where Steve Martin was born.
Okay, yeah.
Waco, Texas, I think it was.
Yeah, that makes sense because actually, it's an unrelated note, but I've been watching that series. I actually already watched all of it, 1883, which is a spinoff of Yellowstone. Yellowstone is a huge show right now. And oddly enough, I haven't seen Yellowstone yet. I've been going backwards because technically 1883 and 1923 come before that series.
Right.
But they mentioned in 1883, that Brazos river or whatever that's in Texas. So I was like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. But I didn't realize the connection there.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. It's funny because he takes, like, you're not too sure if you can actually trust a word from his mouth because he ends up saying lines from the actual show.
Right. He incorporates that into his daily life to the annoyance of some of his friends, and he gets recognized on the street all the time by people that used to watch the show, and then they kind of remind him of his age because, you know, he'll run into somebody really young that says, oh, I used to watch that show with my dad, you know, like a long time ago. And you find out that the dad was actually a bigger fan of the show than the son. But yeah, there's funny things like that happening all the time throughout the show. And eventually a network comes to, I guess it was the original network, comes to him. They want to do a revival of the series.
Which is very popular today, revivals of shows.
Oh, yeah. It is. But he finds out, much to his disappointment, that his role is significantly diminished, and then he's no longer going to be the star of it. It's like they wanted his character to be an invalid, pretty much, like he's, you know, somebody else, like a female, has taken over his role.
And the interesting thing is that the reason for that is because of the murder in that season was basically they were framed for murder. They're like, you all did it. So they're like, there's a lot of pushback of, you know, we don't know that you're a murderer or not, so we kind of put you on the back burner here. So,
and his stunt double is a woman, which is hilarious, played by Jane Lynch, who is really funny in her own right. But I thought that was a really hilarious twist on that because she has like the white hair and everything like him, and dresses like him and everything, but
even steals his women.
Right. So you've got him, and then you have Martin Short plays Oliver Putnam, who is a struggling Broadway director, who's he's well known, but he's also had a lot of shows that kind of bombed. He was notorious for making these wild, huge budget productions that never seem to work out. So he's always looking for that next big gig that's going to make him rich or whatever. And
what was the one that he was working on that made them like no, it was Splash?
Yeah,
Splash.
He was doing a theatrical adaptation of Splash, and it was, and they had actual water, like a tank of water or something on stage, and it ended up being a big disaster.
Here's the funny thing about that: there is actual like big budget Broadway shows like that will go far and beyond, and it just ends up being a complete disaster. One show comes to mind called the Spider-Man Into the Dark, I think is what it was called. And it was a complete disaster because they went beyond. Okay, so Splash, I think they did what was it, like pools or something like that, and it was
they had some kind of a pool built into the stage or whatever, and I think it ended up flooding the theater or something like that, and it was just a big mess. And
with the Spider-Man Into the Dark, it was like they had wires and everything like that. You know, you got Spider-Man, you got Green Goblin on their show. You're going to have them spinning across the theater and everything like that. You already see it in your head right there.
This is not going to work.
This is going to be awful.
So he's very close with his son, but we find that because of his lack of success, he actually is always going to his son to borrow money, which is kind of a reversal on what we normally would see in family scenarios, where usually the kids, even when they become adults, that they struggle and they end up having to go back to their parents for, to bail them out. And so it's a nice little role reversal there, where a parent is actually the one who's in financial trouble, and it causes his son a lot of frustration.
Yeah. It's that is like, I don't know what I would think if my dad actually, he wouldn't. I know my dad. He wouldn't come up to me and ask for money or anything like that.
No.
But he's not like some guy trying to make a big budget Broadway musical. Yeah.
And Selena Gomez plays Mabel Mora, who is an artist, and she is living in a refurnished apartment in the Arconia that she is renovating for her aunt. Mm-hmm. And spoiler alert here, because again, we said early on that this is not a spoiler-free podcast, so if you haven't seen the series yet, this would be a good point to stop watching the podcast, go check the series out, and then come back and watch this episode. So don't go any further if you don't want to know like plot points and specific details. But anyway, we find out as the season progresses that she is actually connected to the murder victim. That she grew up with him, spent most of her childhood and high school years with him, and so that was an interesting little connection there. And so she has a very personal reason for wanting to find out who murdered her friend Tim.
Right. Well, what was your thoughts going into this show?
I didn't really know what to expect because I had not heard the buzz about it. I know that there were, I guess, a lot of people that were excited about it from the moment that Hulu announced that they were going to be doing a series with Steve Martin and Martin Short, not knowing what it was going to be about. But I hadn't really heard any of that. Like, I just happened to be browsing Hulu and I found it. And I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And it's like, "Oh, it's a series." I'm like, "Well, that's interesting." That they have because I have been watching those two for Steve Martin and Martin Short. I've been watching them for years in movies and SNL and things like that. And so I was like, "Well, this could be good." Somebody that big, being in an actual comedy series.
I mean, Steve Martin and Martin Short, they've been like friends forever. Yeah. I think the first movie that they did, they were both in. Were they both in SNL? I know Steve Martin was.
Steve Martin, a lot of people thought that he was a member of the cast, but he just hosted a lot.
Yeah, that's what it is. Especially he hosted a lot.
Yeah, especially during those early years. He was on there several times throughout the course of each season. Yeah. So he almost became like a cast member now. But Martin Short was
that
on
was
SNL.
Yeah. Yeah, now that fits. Yeah, because now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, wait a minute, no, he wasn't. And then Martin Short, yes, he was. They both did a movie together, The Three Amigos.
Yeah, which is really funny. An underrated comedy, I think.
You're gonna hate me. I've never seen it.
Man, you gotta start going and checking these movies out. It's classic.
What sort of cinephile are you? You don't watch these movies?
No, I mean, that's the thing. Is like, everybody kind of, I think, has their. We definitely have a lot of movies in common, but then you also have that. We have movies that. That I've seen that you've never seen, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So you're going to have those differences there, but it's a classic. It again, I think it's kind of an underrated comedy, but a lot of memorable moments and quotable lines and some pretty hilarious scenes in there. But yeah, I mean, you had two comedy veterans. And I guess there was a lot of excitement about the series before it premiered, and actually the the debut episode set a record for the most watched comedy premiere in Hulu history.
Did it really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that was a really big deal, and hence I guess why it's still been very successful. The 2 seasons that are out, and it's actually, they are in the process of filming season 3 right now. They had announced sometime last year that they had renewed it for a 3rd season, and that is filming right now. But anyway, very, very entertaining show. Lots of twists and turns, and there's a nice little segue between season 1 and season 2, and you have a lot of recurring characters. Some of the other regular cast members that are worth mentioning. You have Amy Ryan, who plays Jan, who turns out to be a love interest for Charles, which is Steve Martin's character. And she ends up she ends up being the murderer.
Yeah.
Which is something that just kind of came out of left field. But it's
they had it pretty well written to where you thought that spoilers, Nathan Lane was he wasn't actually ever, he didn't actually involuntary kill anybody. It was his son that
he was trying to cover it up.
Yeah, which that was all just an accident, anyways.
Yeah, it was a complete accident, and it was. He plays. That was another one that I was going to mention.
Sorry,
Nathan Lane plays Teddy Demas, who owns a chain of popular.
What is it? Dips?
Deli. It's it's like a deli shop.
And, yeah.
And but speaking of the dip thing, Oliver, his one of his quirks is that he's his diet consists of almost exclusively dips and foods that can be dipped, and so he's always whenever they go to at the apartments, whenever somebody has a party or get together or something like that, when everybody else is left, he's scooping up all the dips to take back to his apartment, and he's got a refrigerator stocked full of.
He's got
dips.
A lot. Yeah. I wonder how good those dips are.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be. I mean, if you're practically living off of them.
There's actually some weird food items in this show. Honestly, okay, so you got the dip, and then at one point they went to what's her name? Do you remember the drinks? What was the drink?
Oh, gut milk.
Gut milk.
Which is I think it's supposed to be a nutritious, almost like a protein shake kind of thing, but I believe it's actually got alcohol in it. It's infused with some alcohol or something.
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of alcohol. Yeah.
But they actually end up, once they start their podcast, they actually end up. Gut Milk ends up sponsoring their show, and so they get an endless supply of gut milk. So the characters are always drinking it throughout the series and trying to promote it and everything. So Nathan Lane's character Teddy eventually ends up bankrolling the podcast, the Only Murders in the Building podcast. But of course, everything changes once he becomes a suspect, and he wants to shut them up, and he basically wants to shut the podcast down because he feels that they're getting closer to finding out the truth about what happened, and he can't afford that because he doesn't want to ruin his reputation, and his business would
crumble and fall.
So that was another little plot twist in there.
Nathan Lane, I got to say, is an underrated actor, honestly.
Yeah, he really is.
He's hilarious. And like, okay, so he plays in Lion King as Timon,
Mm-hmm.
and then he plays in Mouse Hunt. I love Mouse Hunt. That's really good. But yeah, and him in this role is another one where I'm like, yes, I love this actor. He's so good.
Yeah, he's a very broad sort of actor because I think people tend to associate him more with theater, Broadway and things like that, because he's also a very talented singer. But he's usually very flamboyant and broad in the way that he plays his characters. But
I mean, theater actors do tend to be. I mean, I'm just saying, theater actors, anyone that has any experience in theater, I'd say, does tend to be really great actors too.
Yeah, it's a great training ground if you want to be an actor, because you have to learn how to improvise.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
and not only that, but also like you speak loudly, but you're not yelling. That's the big thing. Like, I'm actually that's one of my pet peeves is when someone wants to talk to me across the room and they're yelling. They're actually screaming, and you're thinking that they're mad at you. But when you're doing theater work, it's not that. You have to
learn how to project.
Yeah, you have to learn how to project without sounding like you're angry.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely something that theater actors are more used to, and because they say you have to speak in a way that you're reaching. You have to reach to the back of the room, the back of the house, as they say, and so sometimes it's hard for theater actors to transition to film because they're used to that. They're used to they have to.
Oh, I could see that.
They have to make all of their movements and expressions and everything very over the top because everybody, no matter where they're at in the room, has to be able to see them. Obviously, with film, it's different because film is so subtle. You can just move your eyes a little bit, and the camera is going to pick it up. The camera is going to pick up every little nuance, everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
But he's a terrific actor, and great to see him in this as well. Jane Howdyshell plays Bunny Folger, who is she's kind of like I guess she would be the sort of like the building superintendent, if you will.
Yeah.
And doesn't have a lot of friends. She has a sort of a grating sort of personality, and tends to annoy everybody a little bit. And
you kind of end up feeling sorry for her in the second season.
Yeah, once you learn a little bit more, because she has more of a role in season 2, because
she's the victim.
She ends up being the murder victim. And it's great how all of these neighbors kind of come together to investigate her murder. And it's funny because the 3 main characters in the series for season 2, they become the suspects. And so it was a nice little switch from becoming the investigators to becoming the suspects, but they all come together to try to find out who her murderer is, even though they initially didn't really care for her that much.
Yeah, it's it was really heartbreaking near the end. Like when you see that she was, because there was points in there where you're like, oh man, that's really sad that she actually is a pretty lonely person, and then
yeah.
And not only that, but even Steve Martin's daughter ends up his character's daughter,
right?
Not real life daughter. I mean character daughter. Ends up showing up, and that adds a whole new level of danger for them, because now
they had a very strained relationship for. Well, I guess not really strained. They were still communicating, but he wasn't seeing his daughter. Yeah. But she comes back into his life, and she actually kind of She actually kind of helps them with their investigation.
Who's the actress that played her?
Oh, that was. Give me just one moment here. I can find that out. Zoe Margaret Coletti.
Okay.
I had not seen her in anything prior to that, but she plays Lucy, which is Charles's daughter.
And then you also had Cara Delevingne.
Right. She played Alice Banks in season 2, who is another local artist, much like Mabel, but she's more on the successful side. She has an art gallery and things like that, and she ends up kind of getting connected to Mabel, and they actually end up having a little bit of a relationship going on there. She ultimately ends up becoming a suspect as well, because nobody really. She just all of a sudden starts coming around, and nobody really trusts her. Like who is this person? And
just out of the blue.
She kind of has a little air of mystery about her.
Yeah. An interesting thing about Cara Delevingne, I don't know if you've noticed in some of the shots that she has like little red elbows and everything like that.
I didn't catch that.
She also has psoriasis, just like me.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so
that's pretty cool. So you guys have something in common there.
Yeah, and we're close to the same age too. So
okay.
But I thought it was it's nice to actually see someone actually. Oh, you have the same, skin disorder or whatever. But
it's that whole thing going back to, I think sometimes, because they're in the limelight so much, we tend to look at celebrities like they're on a different level than we are because they're famous. But they're just like you and me. They have problems. They have medical issues. There's it's just because of what they've chosen to do for their career that just puts them in front of the camera, and just everybody knows who they are.
But yeah, she did really well with this as well. Who is
another one worth mentioning, Tina Fey.
I was going to say Tina Fey. Yeah,
Tina Fey, another SNL alumnus who
I think her and Steve Martin have become pretty good friends just because of I believe it was someone told this to me. I don't know if this is accurate. Maybe you can correct me on it. But his wife looking similar to Tina Fey.
Yeah, I could see that a little bit.
And I think they joke about it. I think that's what I heard anyways. I don't know.
And obviously because he's hosted SNL so many times over the years, like I think he's way up there now for like he may hold the record for most times hosting. I'm not sure.
I believe that.
He's way up at the top. And so I can see them
still
becoming close.
Didn't he just host like an episode not too long ago either?
It wasn't too long ago, I think. But yeah, Tina Fey plays Cinda Canning, who is the host of the
podcast they listen to.
The podcast that they listen to in the beginning that they're all obsessed with, and she actually it's kind of like everybody turns out to be a suspect at some point in this series, and so they even start, they think that she's a little bit fishy too, when actually it actually turns out to be that her assistant is the one that actually has a connection to everything.
That second season really put you through the loop there of who it could be.
Yeah,
like it really put you through the ringer there, because at some points you were very convinced it was this person. Oh wait, no, it was this person.
Yeah.
Or no, it was that.
And
but by the end, it does make perfect sense.
Yeah, they all they wrap everything up very nicely in both seasons. And Michael Rappaport was another one that I liked his character. He was playing the detective. Police detectives, Detective Krebs, and very funny because he's a comedian, and his spin on he's a very unconventional sort of police detective, but pretty much just every scene almost that he was in was very funny, and just his delivery, and so I thought that was another recurring character that was definitely worth mentioning there. But great cast all around. And again, very very enjoyable series, and just so many little subtle things that little kind of in jokes and things like that here and there that make it really fun to watch. But I think the biggest thing for me was just the chemistry between the three leads, which is, again, you have a very big generation gap there between the two male leads and Selena Gomez, and you wouldn't think that is a combination that would work, but
it works.
Somehow it does.
Yeah, it's like it's one of those things that I think a lot of people like. I don't even know where I'm going anymore. This happens a lot with me. I end up having a thought and it just goes completely poof.
There's medicines out there for that, to help with brain fog. It's okay because my wife and daughters remind me of that all the time, because it happens to me too. I can literally walk into a room for something and a few seconds later forget why I came in there. And like I do, I'm trying that I'm forgetting stuff like that more all the time, or somebody can ask me to do something. Somebody can ask me, hey, would you do me a favor? Can you go in the kitchen and bring me some Tylenol? And then I walk in there and something else will happen. I'll like fix myself a drink or something. And then I'll walk back into the other room with my drink in my hand and be like, where's the Tylenol I asked for? Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot all about that.
Yeah.
That's all right. It's life, but yeah.
I will say this: the show resulting in the podcast thing. That's another thing that I want to do here with our podcast here. On occasion, I would like to be able to do a little bit of a War of the Worlds type of, like a little mini play thing.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that.
I would like to do that.
Sort of like a radio drama.
Yeah, and I'd say those in particular, we probably won't be doing that on the. We probably wouldn't be doing that until we have like animation if we were to do the visuals.
Right.
But we could always do the audios only, and I'd say those probably would be exclusives to like not only the audio only on there, but also on the Spotify and Anchor.
Yeah, some of the other places where you can catch the podcast.
But also if we were to do that, I'd say that those would be special little episodes on our Patreon.
Right.
Because that would take a lot of work, and I'd say,
yeah, that's that would be
a lot of time.
That would be a nice little project to do kind of during the summer hiatus, like between seasons, because that would take a lot of work with editing and all that.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to make weekly podcasts if we were just doing that all the time.
But again, this is a really good show. I started watching it, and then I got Cynthia into it. I think I had already watched a few episodes of season 1, and then she found it, and I'm like, oh, I've already started watching that. I said it's really good, and then she got caught up and watched all the episodes.
Here's the interesting thing. Okay, so Steve Martin actually starred in the remake of the Pink Panther.
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
And the Pink Panther is another sort. Well, it's not a murder mystery, but it is a mystery type of show. Like, well, not mystery, but espionage, like. Type of thing, a spoof of like James Bond and all that stuff. With Inspector Clouseau, and it's got a little bit of detective work in there. And
kind of had a little bit of that. A little bit of that, like if you've seen the Naked Gun movies. And there's a little bit of that type of humor. It's very very satirical.
Yeah, and I'd say that Steve Martin's take on Inspector Clouseau was not as well received. I thought he did really good.
Yeah.
But again, you did really good, and you made it your own, and that's all great. But I think you're also kind of making something that's very familiar, and people tend to hold on to the original. Right. Peter Sellers. Am I saying the right name?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's typically who people envision, and he certainly brought a lot to those movies.
See, here's the bad thing about being a cinephile is that when you know a lot of actors and stuff like that, you start to actually cross-wire some of them.
Yeah.
And that's what was happening to me just then.
Yeah, it all sort of, you find connections, and then it all sort of comes together.
But I'd say that when he made this show, he made his Pink Panther. He made it right.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see what you're getting at there.
Yeah.
Speaking of Steve Martin, though, you took his master class, didn't you?
I did. Yeah.
Did you get anything useful from that, or learn anything about, just because you're more of a writer and director? You've done a little bit of acting, but did you learn something more about the craft of acting, particularly comedy, that maybe you hadn't thought of before when you took that class?
The interesting thing that I took from that is that one, it was mostly talking about stand-up stuff. So, but it was also just the art of comical writing. And the interesting thing that he said that I kind of relate to is that most people don't know this, but comedians tend to be introverts.
Yeah.
And he actually put the study on it on his actual masterclass. There's the study there of comedians. He said not all comedians are introverts, but majority of them are. And here's why introverts make great comedians, because they actually listen to their surroundings. They will pick up and say, "Oh, I like that. What happened there? I'm going to put that in my little comical bit here."
That's I think they're doing that all the time. They're very observant, and you can and I can see that too, because in a lot of ways I'm like that. I'm just like always looking around and or kind of overhearing conversations and stuff. And you think to yourself, man, that's really funny. Like that belongs in a script. That belongs in a movie or something.
Yeah. I got a few scenarios in my life that I'm like, that would be great for a comical bit there.
Yeah.
The thing that's funny is that I'm an introvert, and you're a little bit. Are you a little bit?
I can be.
You're a lot more outspoken than I am. I think.
I think there's a very specific term for what I am, and it's sort of a hybrid between an introvert and an extrovert called an ambivert. I think it is.
Okay.
So it's basically a primarily extroverted person with some introverted tendencies, which I have.
I get it. Yeah. So basically, I guess what you're saying is that you would probably, you would only talk to someone if they actually talk to you. Basically, is that right?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Like I tend to, if I'm in a crowded room with a bunch of people that I don't know, I'm not likely to just go up to someone and start talking to them. But if someone engages me, then I have no problem holding a conversation or anything like that. So it just depends on my surroundings. Sometimes I just kind of hang back, or if I've like maybe started a new job or something, getting to know my coworkers, like you just kind of lay back and try to get a feel for everybody and what their personalities are like, and what what kinds of things can I say or can I not say, and then as I start getting to know people, then I loosen up more and I become more myself.
The funny thing is that an introvert comedian, I imagine when someone sees a comedian like Steve Martin down the street, he will, they'll be like, they would probably walk up to them and be like, hey, tell me a joke.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
It's weird that people who probably would normally be a little bit more shy or reserved have no problem walking up to someone famous.
Yeah.
And I guess that's a testament to how actors and other celebrities draw people in, and you almost feel like, because you've been watching them for so long, you almost feel like they're part of your lives, I guess, or like like they're almost part of your family, because they've been, you've been watching their movies or their TV shows where they're basically, in your living room every week. You're watching them, and so it's funny how people have that sort of connection, where if it was just a random stranger on the street, they probably wouldn't walk up and just start talking to them. But it's like celebrities, they feel like they have some kind of approachability to them simply because they're famous.
I imagine that like someone who's an introvert, and it's like an introvert celebrity, having someone come up to them saying something like that is probably going to be like the few Okay, so say someone comes up to an introvert celebrity and then they talk, ask them for their autograph or whatever, and the introvert celebrity is like very quiet, and it's like, oh yeah, and then immediately that person's like probably thinking, this guy is an asshole. I don't like him. The truth of the matter is that you just interrupted this guy who is at peace when they're quiet. And and not only that, but they're probably socially awkward, probably not very good at conversating. So
because you have to think that when they're playing a role, they're playing a character, and they are also speaking someone else's words.
Yeah.
Most of the time, the jokes and stuff that they're saying, they've been written by somebody else, and so they don't necessarily, and many of them are funny in real life too, but they don't necessarily have that same kind of wit.
Right. And not only that, but it takes time to actually come up with a joke like that. Yeah. And not everyone is going to come up like, say, here's the beauty of movie making. Characters can say things that you wouldn't even think of until like maybe 30 minutes or even like a day later after the event happened. But with a movie, they can say it right then and there and be like, oh, yes, that's how I want to be. You're never going to be that. So and some actors are very good with improvisation, and they can take or they can take the lines from a script and make it their own. But there was I believe there was a segment on. I might have been thinking of a different masterclass. So because I did take a few others. Improv. I believe there was a section on improv with his. Improv is fun. I find improv fun.
Oh yeah, it is. It is a lot of fun.
Some actors don't like improv.
I was not a fan of it. Like initially, like I always found that improv in the beginning, like when I first started to pursue acting, I found that it was a little bit more difficult for me. Like I tended to like that structure. I tended to like to have something prepared, but I eventually became a little bit better at that. And it's like anything else. It just takes practice.
Now here's the thing. The interesting thing about improv, I'm improving right now. Keith actually has his notes in front of him. Yeah, I don't have my notes.
It's a little of both with me. I do kind of have some bullet points, but then I fill it in. I fill in those gaps with improv conversation.
And that's perfect. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. because we've talked about us having notes before, and me, even when I'm having the notes, it doesn't keep me in line
and yeah, keep you on track. But that's okay. You know, I mean, it's we're still very early, in this podcast, and we're still finding a rhythm. But you know, we're getting there.
I'll have to say, I'm going to bring it back to the Only Murders in the Building there. So Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez. What's the what's the
like
word
the overall theme, or
no, like the characters there are so perfect together and everything like that. But what would you think? What do you think actually made it click there with each character individually that made them so entertaining to watch? Because they are entertaining to watch, and you know, it doesn't matter which character you're watching. If they're separate,
they're still interesting.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know. I think it has a lot to do with the different backgrounds for the leads, you know, because again, you have two comedy veterans who have done everything, who have done stand-up comedy. They've done film, they've done television, they've done, Martin Short, you know, has done Broadway. And you know, taking their experience, and then you have someone younger like Selena Gomez, who, you know, hasn't had that experience. And so I think you can kind of see how someone like that is sort of like in character, is sort of learning from, you know, from these older guys who have been around for a while. And yeah, the characters don't really have anything in common with each other. In real life, they probably, you know, Steve Martin and Martin Short probably would have nothing in common with Selena Gomez other than the fact that they're all performers. Yeah. But it somehow works. Those generational differences really add a certain level of chemistry that probably wouldn't be there if you didn't have those differences. So I think it's a nice contrast, and I think that's what really makes it kind of gel. And I think that's what, because the show, I think, has attracted a much broader audience that way. You know, you have people that are like, you know, our age, and particularly, you know, my age, because there's a pretty big age gap between you and me. But, you know, people like my age and older, and that really enjoy the comedy of people like Steve Martin and Martin Short. And then you have a younger generation who I would say probably people that are actually, you know, younger than you, who might watch the show because of her. Yeah. And that's really a perfect mix.
Yeah, it's a perfect melding box. That is bad metaphor. You get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. It's it is.
It's a melding pot.
Yeah, melting pot. Yeah.
Yeah, melting pot. Melting. It's perfect because then you got those two generations having something to watch together.
Exactly. I think, and that's a good point too. I think Only Murders in the Building is a family kind of show.
Well, there is language in it.
There is language.
Yeah.
It is.
So be mindful of that. But
there are certainly adult themes in there, but it's not like some other things on TV.
No,
it's other than the profanity, you know, which might not be good for like kids, like young kids. Yeah. For the most part, it is a show that everybody could sit down and watch together as a family. I'd say so,
yeah.
So that certainly adds an appeal to it, and there are not a lot of shows like that out there right now. Everything is so geared toward a certain demographic, or just fits within a certain niche, where this one, I think, has a much broader appeal, and that's probably why it's been so successful. Yeah. But anyway, it's a great show. go on Hulu and check it out. That there's like I said, there's 2 seasons. I think there's only about 10 episodes in each season.
Yeah,
so,
about 10 episodes.
Yeah, so you could binge watch that easily.
And be ready for the 3rd season, which would have Paul Rudd as the victim.
Yes, yeah. At the very end of season 2, he ends up he only appears in the very last in the season finale of season 2, and he is the murder victim. So that
they take it out of the Arconia.
Yeah. And didn't I think I read something where I think Glenn Close is joining the cast for season 3.
Is it Glenn Close?
I thought it was.
I thought it was Meryl Streep.
Maybe it was Meryl Streep. I can't remember.
They look similar, so yeah. They have similar features.
Yeah, and because I was thinking of was it Meryl Streep or was it this is terrible. Was it Meryl Streep or Glenn Close who was in The Devil Wears Prada?
That was Meryl Streep.
Okay, so it is Meryl Streep then, I guess, that's joining
you might be thinking
cast.
because they had a similar role with being like clothing
right, because I'm getting the movies mixed up.
Yeah, you're mixing 101 Dalmatians with Devil Wears Prada is what you're doing.
That's okay. It's like we've seen a lot of movies, folks. I mean, like it's ridiculous. Just I can tell you right now that we are never going to run out of things to talk about on this podcast between the both of us. I've actually been, a little side note, I've been working on a little project where I've actually been trying to compile a list of every movie that I've ever seen. Now this can be theatrical movies like in the theaters, as well as I would even count like straight to video movies within that, and and streaming movies. So it's a big list. I'm going backwards.
Do you have a Letterboxd?
No, I don't actually. I remember you mentioned that.
Do that. They have because I have that list too. You can look on mine too and see what I've got on there.
Okay.
And we could probably fix up a list of movies that we both haven't seen.
Yeah. But yeah, it's going to be a big list when it's all done. I've started working my way backwards from the most recent movies to the oldest, and so far I have only made it back to through 1995. 1995. And just since 1995, I have seen like well over 1,000 movies that were made from that. I didn't necessarily see that many movies in that time, but as far as movies that were made from that time period to now, it's already over 1,000. So I can't imagine, because I go all the way back to, I've seen most of the movies that I've seen are don't really go much older than the 50s, the 1950s. But a few sprinkled in the 1940s and nothing older than like the 1930s. But still, a lot of movies out there, a lot of TV shows, just music and pop culture and everything in general. So, I mean, theoretically, this podcast could go on for years and years because we've got tons of different things that we could talk about. But
yeah, and movies keep on coming too.
Yep, and but definitely go check out Only Murders in the Building, streaming now on Hulu. Well, we're just about out of time, but before we go, we just want to remind everybody to be sure and subscribe, like, and share to our YouTube channel. And when you subscribe, be sure to tap that little bell icon so that you're receiving all the notifications whenever a new episode drops or when new content is posted. And also, don't forget to follow us on our socials. You'll find those links at the bottom of your screen, as well as down below in the video's description, and at the very end of each episode in the closing credits. So there's no way you can miss them. And there are several other places we mentioned before where you can catch our podcast besides YouTube. And be sure to check out the links below to find out more about that. Leave your comments and questions for us. That's a big one. We definitely want to hear from you. You can reach out by commenting on YouTube or on our social media pages, or you can write to us on our official podcast email, which is kimmellandcox@gmail.com. So talk to us. We want to hear from you. It just makes this so much more fun for us if we can get you all involved in the conversation with us. And so we want to hear your feedback, want to know what you think of the podcast so far. Is there anything you would like us to talk about in the future? Because we're definitely open to talking about other movies and shows that maybe we haven't seen, or maybe something that we wouldn't necessarily be interested in at first glance. So get those comments in there and write to us and let us know what you want to see from us. You can also support us on our Patreon page. We need the support of people like you. We can do this on our own, but it's certainly a lot easier when we have a little bit of extra support, and just so we can put out better quality content and to be able to offer you cooler stuff in the future. Merchandise and all kinds of things will probably be coming at some point in the future. But check out that page to learn more about how you can help, and we've got that link for you too. Next week, we will be talking about the 2020 film Tenet. Yes. Starring Robert Pattinson, which I have not seen, so that's going to be a little homework for me.
It's Robert Pattinson and John David Washington, with Denzel Washington's son.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have heard good things about it, so I'm anxious to check that out, and it sounds like it's going to be one of those movies that keeps you thinking and keeps you guessing the whole time. So be sure to tune in next week for that. But that's all for today. We hope you'll join us next week, and until then, be good to yourselves, and we'll see you next time.
You dipstick.